The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the neighborhood as I set out for Halloween night. Dressed in a costume that transformed me into a fierce pirate, I joined a group of friends, excited thinking of all the treats we may get. Pumpkins grinned at us from every porch, their flickering candlelight illuminating the way as we called out "trick or treat" at each house. Laughter echoed around me as we moved from door to door, collecting candy in our brightly colored bags. The atmosphere buzzed with the thrill of the night, but there was an unsettling stillness that crept in with the shadows. I glanced around, noticing that my friends had drifted ahead, their laughter fading into the distance. I picked up my pace, trying to catch up, but an unusual sensation tickled the back of my neck, a sense of being observed. At the next house, I hesitated, feeling the urge to turn around. The porch light flickered and shadows danced across the lawn, but I dismissed the feeling as nerves. I approached the door, rang the bell, and received a handful of candy. As I turned to rejoin my friends, the sensation intensified. The streets, now dimly lit, seemed to swallow my laughter, isolating me in the night. I moved forward, glancing over my shoulder. Nothing was there, yet the feeling persisted, creeping closer with every step. I could feel eyes boring into my back, the sensation prickling my skin like icy fingers. I quickened my pace, determination fueling my steps as I turned onto a darker street, where the houses loomed larger, their decorations more grotesque. With each house I approached, I felt an undeniable presence lurking just out of sight. The laughter of my friends was now a distant echo, swallowed by the growing darkness. I paused at a particularly decrepit house, its windows dark and empty. The door creaked open slightly, and I felt drawn to it, an inexplicable urge pulling me closer. Steeling myself, I stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath my weight. I reached for the doorbell, but a sudden chill wrapped around me. I spun around, heart racing, scanning the street behind me. There was still no one in sight. My pulse quickened as I realized I was alone, truly alone. As I turned back toward the door, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows. A dark figure, tall and indistinct, lurking at the edge of the yard. My breath caught in my throat as I stumbled back, adrenaline coursing through me. I needed to get away, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The figure remained still, its presence heavy in the night. Finally, I broke free from the trance and bolted down the street, fear propelling me forward. I glanced back, and the figure was closer now, gliding silently behind me, its shape melding with the darkness. I could barely see its features, but an unsettling feeling washed over me. It felt as though it was following me, moving in perfect rhythm with my panic. I raced through the neighborhood, desperate to find my friends. Each turn led me deeper into the labyrinth of dimly lit streets, shadows swallowing me whole. The sound of laughter faded, replaced by the rhythmic crunch of leaves beneath my feet and the faint whisper of the wind. The figure remained just out of view, always lingering on the fringes of the darkness. I spotted a familiar house with a glowing pumpkin on the porch, my heart swelling with hope. I rushed toward it, praying my friends would be inside. I ran up the steps, throwing the door open without hesitation, only to find the room empty. My heart sank as I realized I was truly alone, the laughter and joy of Halloween replaced with an overwhelming silence. Before I could process my thoughts, I heard it, a soft rustle behind me. I spun around, breath hitching in my throat as the door creaked shut, enveloping me in darkness. The shadows shifted, and the figure emerged from the gloom, stepping into the dim light of the porch. It was tall, cloaked in tattered fabric that hung like mist around its body. Its face remained obscured, a void where features should be. Panic surged as I darted toward the back door, but the figure moved closer, gliding across the floor with an unnatural grace. I stumbled, desperately looking for an escape, but the figure closed the distance, its presence swallowing the room in an eerie stillness. I reached the back door and yanked it open, bursting into the cool night air. I sprinted down the back steps, fear igniting every nerve in my body. The figure didn't follow, but I could feel it watching from the shadows, an unseen force that would always be there, lingering just outside the edges of my vision. As I ran through the backyard, I spotted a light illuminating the street ahead, an inviting glow that promised safety. I dashed toward it, the sounds of the Halloween festivities slowly returning, laughter echoing in the distance. I was almost there, almost free from the looming dread. I burst out onto the street, breathing heavily, my heart racing. My friends stood nearby, their laughter filling the air, as if the shadows had never reached me. I looked back toward the house, but the figure was gone. swallowed by the darkness. Relief washed over me, but a shiver crawled up my spine as I realized I would never forget the feeling of being hunted. That night, Halloween would remain a beautiful memory marred by an unseen terror. I laughed with my friends, but the echo of that quiet presence lingered, a reminder that sometimes the darkness holds more than just candy and costumes. The autumn sun dipped low on the horizon as I wandered into the pumpkin patch, its vibrant orange globes glowing against the backdrop of fading daylight. The field stretched endlessly, a sea of pumpkins nestled among the brittle vines, their earthy scent mingling with the crisp fall air. I had come to pick out the perfect pumpkin, the kind that would be the centerpiece of my Halloween decorations. But a sense of unease began to gnaw at me as I stepped deeper into the rows. I picked my way through the patch, taking my time to appreciate the subtle variations of each pumpkin. Some were perfectly round, while others had unusual shapes, their skin marred with scars and blemishes. The stillness of the patch surrounded me, broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant caw of crows. As I examined a particularly lopsided pumpkin, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure loomed at the edge of the field, cloaked in shadow. I turned my head, but the figure vanished, swallowed by the rows of pumpkins. My heart raced, and I glanced around, the feeling of being watched creeping over me like a cold fog. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was merely my imagination playing tricks. Continuing to stroll through the patch, I focused on finding the right pumpkin, yet I couldn't shake the sensation of eyes on me. Each step I took echoed in my ears, and the quietness of the evening seemed to amplify every sound, the rustle of leaves, the faintest crack of a twig. The pumpkin patch was supposed to be a fun and festive place, but the weight of silence wrapped around me like a heavy cloak. I finally selected a pumpkin, its deep orange hue and unique shape perfect for carving. I felt a rush of relief, thinking it would be nice to head home soon, but as I turned to leave, I spotted the figure again, lurking further down the row. It stood completely still, a dark silhouette against the twilight sky, but the instant I focused on it, it melted back into the shadows. Panic bubbled within me. I quickened my pace, moving toward the exit, but the sensation of being followed tightened around me. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a prank? An overactive imagination? I glanced over my shoulder, scanning the rows for any sign of the figure, but found nothing but the pumpkin vines twisting eerily in the fading light. As I approached the end of the patch, I heard the faintest sound, a soft rustling behind me, like footsteps in the leaves. My heart pounded louder, and I fought the urge to run. I forced myself to keep walking, each step heavier than the last. I wanted to call out for help, but my voice vanished in my throat. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught my attention. I turned just in time to see the figure darting between the pumpkins, a dark silhouette weaving through the rows. My heart dropped, and I took off, sprinting toward the entrance. The cold evening air hit my lungs as I pushed myself to move faster, adrenaline surging through my veins. The rustling grew louder, more frantic, echoing my own panic. I could hear branches snapping behind me, feel the weight of the presence drawing closer. I didn't dare look back, I could only focus on the path ahead. The exit was so close, yet it felt like a cruel mirage. Just as I neared the edge of the patch, a shrill laugh sliced through the silence, a sound that sent ice coursing through my veins. It wasn't playful or light, it was twisted, echoing among the pumpkins, reverberating in my mind. I stumbled, tripping over the uneven ground, my heart racing in time with my breaths. I glanced back, finally allowing myself to see. The figure stood between the rows, its features obscured by the shadows, but I could sense its gaze locked onto me. It was a silhouette of a person, yet something about it was profoundly wrong. The way it stood, hunched and unnatural, as if it were both there and not. I turned back and bolted, desperation fueling my legs. The exit was finally within reach, the light spilling from the open gate like a beacon of safety. I burst through, pushing past the wooden fence that bordered the patch. I raced into the safety of the parking lot, my heart pounding against my ribs as I glanced over my shoulder one last time. The pumpkin patch lay behind me, still and silent, with nothing but the silhouettes of pumpkins under the growing darkness. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as I hurried to my car, my breath coming in quick gasps. I fumbled for my keys, eyes darting to the patch, half expecting the figure to emerge from the shadows. Finally, I started the engine, and the familiar sound of the car filled the silence. I peeled out of the lot, leaving the patch behind me, but I couldn't rid myself of the lingering chill. The laughter echoed in my mind, and I wondered if the pumpkin patch held more secrets than I had dared to uncover. As I drove home, I resolved never to return. The joyous spirit of Halloween had morphed into something sinister, and I knew that some places should remain undisturbed, hidden in the depths of the night. The memory of the figure would stay with me, a haunting reminder of the darkness that could lurk even among the most innocent of festivities. The old radio sat in the corner of my attic, a relic from a time long past. Dust covered its surface and cobwebs draped across its knobs. I had found it during one of my childhood explorations, buried beneath a pile of forgotten treasures. It had never worked properly, but it held a strange fascination for me, its vintage design stirring my imagination. One rainy afternoon, boredom drove me back to the attic, and I decided to tinker with the radio. I brushed off the dust and plugged it in, the familiar crackle and hum of electricity bringing it to life. As I turned the dials, the static faded, revealing faint snippets of music interspersed with bursts of interference. It felt like a nostalgic journey through forgotten frequencies, a connection to a world beyond my own. Then, something shifted. The static began to clear, replaced by a low hum that reverberated through the room. I adjusted the knobs, searching for the source, and the sound intensified, resonating deep within my chest. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, haunting and rhythmic, as if it was calling out to me. With each twist of the dial, the sound grew clearer, morphing into a series of tones that ebbed and flowed like a tide. It was mesmerizing, lulling me into a trance-like state. I closed my eyes, losing myself in the sound as if it were weaving a spell around me. And then, amidst the melodic tones, a voice emerged, soft and distorted, as if it were being transmitted from a distant realm. I leaned in closer, straining to hear the words, but they were layered with static, slipping through my grasp like sand. The message was tantalizingly close, yet forever out of reach. My heart raced as I adjusted the frequency, desperate to decipher the enigmatic voice. It spoke of places unknown, of a world beyond the veil of reality. The more I listened, the more I felt a connection to the signal, as though it were tapping into something deep within me. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The melodic hum transformed into a dissonant chorus, the sounds overlapping and intertwining until they became chaotic. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, and the room seemed to pulse in time with the signal. I opened my eyes, startled as a wave of unease washed over me. The radio crackled violently and the voice warped, now filled with urgency. I could feel the energy in the attic shift, the walls vibrating with the intensity of the transmission. It was as if the very fabric of reality was fraying, unraveling before my eyes. I stumbled back, heart pounding, but something compelled me to stay, to hear what the voice had to say. With one final twist of the dial, the static cleared completely. The room fell silent, and for a moment, everything was still. I held my breath, anticipation coursing through my veins, waiting for the signal to return. Then it came, a single, powerful tone that resonated deep within my core. It surged through the air like a wave, engulfing me in its energy. I could feel my surroundings fade, the boundaries of my reality blurring as the sound enveloped me completely. I was being pulled into the very essence of the signal, my body and mind entwined with the vibrations that surrounded me. Images flashed before my eyes, fragmented visions of landscapes both familiar and alien. I saw towering mountains shrouded in mist, endless oceans beneath stormy skies, and vast fields of wildflowers dancing in the wind. Each scene was more vivid than the last, filled with colors and sensations that overwhelmed my senses. I felt both exhilarated and terrified, suspended in a liminal space between worlds. The voice returned, clearer this time, its urgency unmistakable. It warned of dangers lurking in the shadows, of forces that sought to breach the boundaries of existence. I understood that the signal was a warning, a call to awareness, yet the beauty of the images made it difficult to pull away. I struggled to grasp what the voice was trying to convey. My heart raced as the visions intensified, the landscapes shifting rapidly like a movie reel. I sensed an impending climax, a moment when everything would converge. The signal crackled with energy, the room pulsating in time with the rhythm of my heartbeat. Then, without warning, the signal fractured. The harmonious tones shattered, replaced by chaos. The images became distorted, swirling into a vortex of darkness. The comforting beauty turned into a nightmare, shadows creeping closer, tendrils of darkness reaching out to envelop me. Panic surged within me as the voice transformed into a cacophony of screams, echoing in my mind. I was being pulled apart, the world around me collapsing into chaos. I clutched my head, desperate to escape the onslaught of sound and vision. In a moment of clarity, I lunged for the radio, my fingers trembling as I turned the knobs frantically. I needed to break the connection, to sever the thread that bound me to the signal. Finally, with one final twist, the radio crackled violently and fell silent. Suddenly, I was back in the attic, the shadows retreating, the oppressive energy dissipating. I gasped, heart racing as I looked around. The radio sat quietly, its knob still, as if it had never held the power to transport me to another realm. I felt shaken, the weight of the experience lingering in my mind. The visions still flickered at the edges of my memory. And I realized I had brushed against something profound, something that lay just beyond the veil of our reality. The signal had beckoned me, promising both enlightenment and chaos. As I descended the attic stairs, I knew that the radio would always be a part of me, a reminder of the power it held. I couldn't shake the feeling that the signal might call to me again, whispering its secrets, tempting me to uncover the mysteries hidden in the shadows. From that day forward, I approached the attic with caution, understanding that some signals should remain unanswered, that some connections were best left unexplored. The radio may have been silent, but the echoes of its call would forever resonate in my mind, a haunting reminder of the thin line between worlds. The Halloween party at school was the highlight of the year, and I had planned my costume for weeks. I wanted to be the best dressed, the one who turned heads and sparked envy. After countless hours of searching, I finally found the perfect outfit, an elaborate vampire costume, complete with a velvet cape, white ruffled shirt, and fake fangs that glimmered in the light. I'd practiced my sinister laugh in front of the mirror, relishing the idea of how perfect I would look. On the day of the party, I put on the costume with a sense of triumph, admiring my reflection. The dark colors contrasted sharply with my pale skin, and the fangs glinted wickedly. I felt powerful and confident as I headed to the school gym, the excitement buzzing in the air. As I entered the gym, a vibrant scene unfolded before me. Streams of colorful lights danced across the walls, illuminating students dressed as witches, zombies, and superheroes. Laughter and music enveloped the room, creating an atmosphere of pure joy. But something tugged at the corners of my mind, a strange sensation that wouldn't leave me alone. As I mingled with friends, I noticed a peculiar vibe lingering among the crowd. It was subtle but distinct, like the hushed whispers of a forgotten secret. I brushed it aside, focusing instead on the fun and festivities. We played games, danced, and shared stories about our costumes, the joy temporarily dulling the nagging feeling. Then, as the night wore on, I felt it again, the whispers, sharper this time, resonating in my mind. The music faded into the background, and I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. I watched as groups formed and dissolved, laughter echoing in pockets throughout the gym. A chill crept down my spine as I glanced around, feeling as though unseen eyes were watching. I pushed through the throngs of students, heading toward the refreshment table. As I poured myself a cup of punch, I noticed a group of kids gathered around a peculiar booth in the corner. A sign above it read, "Mystical Costume Exchange." My curiosity piqued. I moved closer to investigate. The booth was manned by an elderly woman, her hair silver and wild, and her eyes glinted with an otherworldly light. She was draped in layers of colorful fabrics, and her presence seemed to draw me in. I watched as a student traded their costume for something else, excitement evident on their face. The woman smiled, and I could swear I saw shadows flicker behind her. I stepped forward, compelled by a force I couldn't explain. My heart raced as I considered trading my vampire costume for something even more extravagant. I was drawn to a shimmering gown hanging nearby, the fabric swirling with colors that seemed to change with every flicker of the lights. I imagined how stunning I would look wearing it, the envy of everyone around me. Without thinking, I hesitated only briefly before reaching for my cape. The elderly woman raised her eyebrows in delight as I laid it on the table. I pointed to the gown, and without a word, she reached for it, wrapping it around my shoulders. The moment the fabric touched my skin, an electric current surged through me. I gasped, but the feeling transformed into a wave of warmth that enveloped my entire body. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a nearby mirror, and my breath caught in my throat. The gown shimmered brilliantly, the colors swirling around me, but my features had also changed. My face had transformed into something otherworldly with sharp angles and luminous skin. I looked breathtaking yet completely unfamiliar. Panic bubbled up inside me, but the feeling was quickly overshadowed by a strange sense of power. I turned away from the booth, overwhelmed with excitement and confusion. The whispers echoed in my mind again, but now they were layered with sweet melodies, pulling me toward the dance floor. I twirled into the crowd, feeling the energy surge through me with every movement. But as I danced, I noticed something unsettling. The laughter of my friends faded into the background, replaced by a new sound, a soft, rhythmic chant that flowed through the room like a spell. I glanced around and the faces of my classmates began to shift, their eyes dulling, their expressions vacant. They danced mechanically as though they were puppets on strings. My heart raced. This wasn't the vibrant party I had entered. The shadows around me deepened and the room felt like a trap, the walls closing in. I reached for my friends, but they didn't respond. They moved past me as if I were invisible, their laughter replaced by that eerie chant. I staggered back, realizing the power I had traded my identity for. The warmth from the gown turned icy, and I felt the weight of something dark wrapping around my heart. The whispers crescendoed, forming a chorus that resonated through my mind, urging me to dance with them, to give in to the madness surrounding me. Panic surged through my veins. I tore my gaze from the throng of shadowy figures and made my way back toward the booth. The elderly woman still sat there, her eyes glinting with a knowing smile as I approached. I wanted to demand my cape back, to reclaim my old self, but the words lodged in my throat. I felt the gown constricting, as if it were tightening its grip around me, pulling me deeper into a realm I didn't understand. I was losing myself, fading into the darkness that enveloped the gym. In desperation, I reached out, hands trembling. The woman regarded me with a knowing gaze, and I saw shadows swirl behind her, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to beckon me. I desperately grasped the edges of the gown, my heart pounding, and pleaded silently for release. With a sudden clarity, I yanked the gown over my head, the fabric falling to the floor like a forgotten dream. As soon as it slipped away, the whispers turned to shrieks, echoing in my mind as I turned and fled. I sprinted through the gym, pushing past the entranced figures, ignoring their vacant stares. I burst through the door and out into the cool night air, gasping as I escaped the suffocating shadows behind me. I ran until I reached the safety of my neighborhood, the sounds of the party fading into the distance. My heart pounded as I glanced back at the school, the haunting whispers still echoing in my mind. The allure of that mystical gown lingered, taunting me with the power it promised. As Halloween night faded into a quiet dawn, I swore I would never return to that party, that booth, or the wrong costume. I had glimpsed the darkness that lay behind the veil of allure, a reminder of the price one could pay for a moment of enchantment. The whispers may haunt me, but I was determined to keep my true self, no matter the cost. The old house at the end of the street had always captivated my imagination. The moment I first laid eyes on it, I felt an inexplicable connection, as if it was calling to me. Its paint was faded, and the porch sagged under the weight of time, but it was the whispers that drew me in. They curled around the corners of my mind like tendrils of fog, enticing and teasing with the promise of secrets hidden within. I had heard the stories from the neighborhood kids, tales of laughter echoing through empty halls, of shadows that danced just out of sight, and of a mysterious presence that could be felt but never seen. The legends didn't deter me, they fueled my curiosity. On Halloween night, when the moon hung low and bright, I decided it was finally time to explore the Whispering House. As I approached, a chill skittered across my skin, but the thrill of discovery pushed me onward. I stepped onto the creaking porch, the wood groaning beneath my weight. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of hushed voices swirling around me, blending with the sound of rustling leaves in the wind. I hesitated, but the pull was irresistible. I pushed the door open, and it swung wide with a soft groan, revealing a dimly lit foyer. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through the grimy windows. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and mildew, and the whispers seemed to grow even more distinct, beckoning me deeper into the house. I took a step inside, the floorboards creaking in protest as I ventured further. The whispers began to form shapes in my mind, fragmented memories of laughter, of conversations long past. Each room I entered offered glimpses of the life once lived within these walls. Faded photographs adorned the walls, the faces smiling at me, urging me to stay. I wandered through the parlor, its once grand furniture draped in white sheets, like specters waiting for the return of their owners. I could almost hear the laughter of children playing, their joy lingering like a distant echo. I moved through the house, mesmerized by its forgotten beauty, captivated by the way time had left its mark. But the deeper I ventured, the more the whispers transformed. They grew urgent, shifting from laughter to a pleading murmur. Shadows flitted across the corners of my vision, and I felt an unseen force tugging at me, drawing me toward the staircase. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to resonate from the very walls, urging me to ascend. Each step I took felt heavier, as if the weight of the house bore down on me. The whispers wrapped around me like tendrils of fog, filling my ears with hushed warnings and sorrowful cries. I reached the top of the staircase, and a long hallway stretched out before me, lined with doors that promised untold secrets. I opened the first door, revealing a small bedroom frozen in time. A bed with faded linens, a dusty dresser, and a rocking chair swaying ever so slightly as if a presence lingered there. The whispers grew louder, and I could sense the sorrow that clung to the room, a longing for what once was. I stepped inside, the chill creeping up my spine, and the door creaked shut behind me. As I turned to leave, a rush of wind blew through the room, sending shivers down my spine. The whispers surged, swirling around me, carrying with them fragments of memories that were not my own. I saw fleeting images, children playing, laughter echoing, a woman singing softly in the kitchen. But then, darkness fell over the scenes, and I could feel despair seeping into my bones. I stumbled back, desperate to escape, but the door refused to budge. The walls seemed to pulse with life, the whispers rising to a frenzied pitch. I pressed my hands against the door, willing it to open, and finally it swung wide, throwing me into the hallway. I gasped for air, the weight of despair lifting for a moment as I stumbled backward. I turned to flee, but the house felt alive, its very structure shifting around me. I dashed down the hallway, the whispers trailing behind me like shadows. They wrapped around me, merging into a single haunting voice that tugged at my heart, imploring me to stay just a little longer. I reached the staircase and raced down, each step a frantic escape from the sorrow that had enveloped me. I burst through the front door, the cool night air crashing over me like a wave. The whispers faded as I stepped onto the porch, but I could still feel the house watching me, the weight of its history pressing against my back. I stumbled away from the whispering house, heart racing and breathless, as I made my way back down the street. I could still hear the echoes of laughter in my mind, the haunting whispers lingering in my thoughts, promising that they would never truly leave me. As I reached the end of the street, I glanced back one last time, my heart heavy with the knowledge that I had been touched by something ancient, something yearning to be remembered. The house stood silent, yet I could almost see the silhouettes of its former occupants moving behind the windows, their longing forever trapped within the walls. In that moment, I understood that the whispering house would always hold a part of me, a piece of my soul forever entwined with the echoes of its past. No matter how far I ran, I knew I would carry its whispers within me, a haunting reminder of the secrets it held, the stories it yearned to share, and the life that once thrived within its embrace. It was Halloween night, and I had planned a low-key evening at home. The decorations were hung, a cauldron of candy was ready for the trick-or-treaters, and the faint sound of laughter echoed in the distance. I settled into my couch with a mug of hot cider, eager to enjoy the festivities from the comfort of my living room. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to a group of children dressed in vibrant costumes, their eyes sparkling with excitement as they shouted, "Trick or treat!" I filled their bags with candy and watched as they dashed away into the night, their laughter fading into the distance. When the doorbell rang again, I didn't think much of it at first. I opened the door, but no one stood on the other side. Instead, at my feet lay a small, intricately designed mask. It was crafted from dark, glossy material that shimmered under the porch light. I bent down to pick it up, admiring the detailed carvings of twisted faces and swirling patterns etched into its surface. The eyes were hollow, deep recesses that seemed to pull in the light, and the mouth was stretched into a grin that was both eerie and inviting. Curiosity piqued, I brought the mask inside and set it on the coffee table. I couldn't recall seeing it at any of the local shops or parties. A chill coursed through me as I studied it, wondering who had left it at my doorstep, and why. As the night wore on, I kept glancing at the mask, its presence growing heavier in the room. Shadows danced around the edges of my vision, and I shook my head to clear it. I needed to focus on something else. I turned on the television, letting the flickering images distract me from the creeping unease that had settled over me. But the mask remained, a persistent presence in the periphery. After a few more trick-or-treaters, I decided to take a closer look at it. As I held it in my hands, I marveled at how the mask seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The patterns shifted slightly, and for a moment I thought I could hear whispers emanating from its surface, soft and elusive, just beyond comprehension. An irresistible urge overcame me. I knew I shouldn't wear it. There was a nagging voice in the back of my mind warning me to resist. But the allure was powerful. It called to me, and I felt compelled to see what lay beneath its surface. I slid the mask over my face, adjusting it until it fit snugly. The world around me warped instantly. My living room faded away, replaced by a vibrant and chaotic landscape. The colors were too bright, the sounds too sharp. I could hear laughter mingling with whispers, the chorus of voices swirling around me, creating a tapestry of sound that was both inviting and alarming. I staggered back, grappling with the dizzying sensations. In this new reality, I could see figures moving in the distance. They were cloaked in shadows, their forms shifting and flickering like flames. They danced and twirled, faces obscured by their own masks, each one unique, each one a grotesque reflection of emotion and chaos. I was drawn to them, captivated by the rhythm of their movements and the way their laughter rang through the air, echoing in my mind. I stumbled forward, feeling an invisible force guiding me toward them. The mask tightened against my face, its grip unyielding. I wanted to tear it off, but the energy pulsating through me propelled me deeper into the throng of masked revelers. Their eyes, dark and hollow like those of the mask, locked onto me as I joined their dance. I moved with an instinct I didn't know I possessed, surrendering to the frenzy around me. Laughter filled the air, a symphony of joy and madness that enveloped me entirely. But as I spun and twirled, the laughter began to shift. It grew darker, more menacing, the joyous celebration transforming into something sinister. Faces turned toward me, their expressions twisted in delight as if they thrived on my confusion and fear. I felt their gaze pierce through the mask, digging into the very core of my being, exposing vulnerabilities I had never acknowledged. The sensation of joy transformed into an overwhelming weight. Panic surged within me as I realized I was trapped within this realm, unable to escape. I frantically clawed at the mask, desperation flooding my thoughts. The revelers continued their dance, blissfully unaware of my struggle. Suddenly, a wave of icy energy washed over me, freezing my movements. I gasped, feeling the grip of the mask tightening as if it were feeding on my terror. I could see the figures around me morphing, their once joyous expressions morphing into faces of hunger and desire, ravenous for something I couldn't comprehend. A blinding light exploded around me, illuminating the darkness. The revelers shrieked and recoiled, their features distorting in the brightness. It was too much. I could feel the world unraveling. I reached out to tear the mask away one last time, summoning every ounce of strength within me. With a final guttural cry, I ripped the mask off my face and stumbled back into my living room. The vibrant chaos vanished in an instant, replaced by the mundane stillness of my home. I fell to the floor, gasping for breath, heart racing wildly as I stared at the mask that lay in front of me, now just a simple object devoid of its former allure. The night dragged on, silence enveloping me, yet I couldn't shake the lingering echoes of laughter from my mind. I placed the mask in a box and locked it away in the attic, sealing it tight, hoping never to see it again. Yet, even as I closed the attic door, I could still feel the weight of the mask's presence in my thoughts. It had taken a piece of me, a part of my soul that I couldn't quite reclaim. I would always remember the revelers, their laughter, and the way they danced under the light of a moon I couldn't touch. As Halloween night wore on, I settled into bed, trembling with a sense of foreboding. I knew that the mask was not just an object. It was a doorway to something much larger, something waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to don it and plunge into the chaos that lay within. Halloween is supposed to be fun. It's a time for kids to dress up, run around the neighborhood, and overdose on candy. But this year, I can feel it. There's an edge that makes my skin crawl, like static before a storm. I was hanging decorations when I first spotted him, the Lantern Man. He walked down the street wearing an old black coat, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, casting a deep shadow over his face. In his hand he held a lantern that glowed an eerie, sickly green. At first, I thought it was just an elaborate costume, but he didn't stop at any house. He didn't speak to anyone. He moved as though he had no destination, yet there was purpose in every step. As days passed, he became a fixture in my life. Each night he appeared outside my window, just far enough away that I could barely make out his features. The light flickered like a dying star, casting twisted shadows on the pavement. I felt a pull toward him, as if he were an unwelcome magnet, luring me closer to the edge of something I could not understand. I began to notice him more as Halloween drew near. He was everywhere, lurking in the corners of my vision, watching from across the street, standing by the park. No one else seemed to notice him, or if they did, they brushed it off as an illusion. When I mentioned him to my neighbors, they offered blank stares, as if I had spoken in a foreign tongue. "You're just imagining things," they would say, shaking their heads as if to dismiss me. The more I tried to explain, the more I felt like I was spiraling into madness. Each night brought an overwhelming dread that crept into my bones, settling like ice in my veins. I felt compelled to watch him, to study the way he stood and the way his lantern glowed, beckoning with its light. The night before Halloween, I lay awake, heart racing. I pulled back the curtains and saw him standing outside, closer than ever before, his lantern illuminating the darkened street. The glow flickered, casting shapes against the walls of my house. I felt trapped within my own skin, as if my heart had made its home in my throat. Every instinct screamed for me to flee, to run far away from him, but my body refused to cooperate. Instead, I remained rooted to the spot, transfixed by the shadows he cast. I tried to shake off the fear, convincing myself he was just a figment of my imagination, a remnant of my childhood fears. But as I looked into the darkness, I could see the faint outline of his form, and the closer I looked, the more real he became. Finally, he began to move. The lantern swayed slightly as he walked, and my breath quickened. I should have slammed the curtains shut, locked the door, and turned away, but I found myself staring, unable to break the spell he had over me. He took a few steps toward my house, and in that moment, I was certain he was coming for me. Panic surged through me, and I tore away from the window, racing to the back door. I needed to escape. I opened it and dashed into the backyard, heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the rustle of leaves, the crunch of twigs beneath my feet, but I didn't dare look back. I wanted to put as much distance between us as I could. As I reached the fence, I paused to catch my breath. The darkness felt suffocating, like it was closing in around me. I turned to glance back toward the house, but the moment I did, I froze. He was there, standing just outside the door, lantern raised high, the light spilling over the threshold like a warning. The glow revealed nothing but shadows around him. I staggered back, fear coursing through me, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. But there was nowhere to go. I stumbled forward, my feet carrying me toward the street. I needed to reach my car to drive away from this nightmare. But as I neared the edge of the yard, I heard a sound, a low hum resonating in the darkness. I stopped, paralyzed by the sound. Then slowly he raised the lantern, and the light grew brighter. It bathed everything in its greenish glow, illuminating my surroundings with an unnatural light. I shielded my eyes, but I could still see the outline of his form, now magnified by the lantern's glow. The shadows around him twisted and writhed as if they had a life of their own, reaching out toward me. In that moment, I understood. The lantern wasn't just a light, it was a beacon, a summons to something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of reality. The ground trembled slightly beneath my feet, and I felt an overwhelming urge to return to him, to give in to whatever it was that he wanted. But I resisted. I tore my gaze away from him and ran, fueled by desperation. I raced toward my car, scrambling to find the keys. I fumbled in my pocket and finally grasped them, heart pounding. I turned back to look one last time, and for a brief second, our eyes met. His eyes, hollow and infinite, held secrets of ages past. They beckoned me to come closer, to step into the light. I felt a pull in my gut, a yearning I couldn't understand. But I turned away and jumped into the car, slamming the door shut, locking it tight. The engine roared to life, drowning out the hum. I sped off, leaving the house, the street, the lantern man behind me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him standing there, but he was gone. Just a shadow in the darkness, lost to the night. As I drove away, I could still feel the weight of his gaze on my back. I don't know what he wanted, but as the miles stretched between us, the dread in my gut turned to something else, something far worse. I thought I had escaped, but now I can't shake the feeling that I'll never be free. The lantern man is still out there waiting for me, and I can feel his lantern's light flickering in my mind, beckoning me back to the darkness I thought I had left behind.